Okay, so the recording has started and I will now hand over to Claire. Claire, if you can just start by introducing yourself and the session. And as I said, please feel free to enter any questions into the chat box and I will pose them to Claire throughout. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I want to extend a personal thank you to Emma for the work she's done on launching our Business Support Hub. We are not immune as a university to what's happening in the global pandemic, and Emma said we really need to do something as a business school to support the business community and our stakeholders. So that's why this came about. It's our third webinar, is that right, Emma? That we've run as part of our series. And when we were designing it, Emma said, you need to do one as well, Claire. So I said, yeah, I'd like to do one. And she said, and you're going to do it on authentic leadership. And I said, okay. And I never want to take a challenge. I decided to do some reading and realised actually it was an excellent subject to cover. So very briefly, as Emma said, I'm Claire Schofield and I'm the director of the business school. I joined Wolverhampton University in September 2018. That seems a lifetime ago. So I've not quite done 2 years, but I've spent about 20 years in business schools. This will be the third university I've worked in. And I relish the challenge of working in the West Midlands, working with dynamic companies, working with our degree apprentices, undergraduates, postgraduates, alumni, and our business community. So I'm delighted so many of you could join us today for our session. So I know we shared in the brief and on Eventbrite what we're going to cover today, but there's a structure to what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what's distinctive about authentic leadership, what it is, what its history is, and why we think it's so important at this particular time, managing a crisis. I will be weaving into that stories of what we've done as a business school to lead through the crisis. As you can imagine, I think it's been well documented that universities have had to do an awful lot, but so have schools and colleges. So big training providers and all organisations, they've had to look at everything they do. And I'm going to reflect on that and share with you some of the ways that we've managed change in the university and the business school. And then I'm going to talk about how authentic leadership fits into the broader narrative about leadership. And we can share some of our experiences there because I know it's a really exciting, vibrant topic. And then at the end, we're going to pose some questions that encourage you to think about your authentic leadership and what are the building blocks for that, what sorts of questions you need to be asking yourself if you're either a developing emerging leader or if you're an established leader, to think about how you might want to lead in a more authentic way going forward. So is everybody okay for me to move on to start the webinar now? I've set out what we're going to cover. Yep, perfect. So what is authentic leadership? Well, authentic leadership draws, it's a very established form of leadership discourse in the academic leadership literature, but it comes from it's a moral perspective. So any people that have been a leader or are working with a leader will know that values are really, really important. And one of the building blocks of values is morals. And this is where this fits into. So authentic leadership is one of 3 forms of moral leadership. And you can see that on the slide. The other 2 are ethical and servant. So if I just share with you that if we were talking about servant leadership, we'll be having an emphasis on stakeholders. And I know most of you will have had to work with stakeholders to make changes and to communicate what those changes are going to be through the crisis. And if you talk about ethical leadership, it's about norms and standards. But for authentic leadership, it's about your leadership self-awareness and courage. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So this is about morality. And you might think, well, what on earth has that got to do with leadership? But as we explore through the webinar, you'll hear that in actual fact, we think about morals and leadership all the time. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about morals and leadership, as we'll explore later. But let's first put that into practice. I want to pose a leadership conundrum. I want you to imagine that you're the owner of a small business and you employ 10 people. And you really want this business to survive through the crisis, through the pandemic. But you've got to make some changes. What would you do? Well, that's a moral question, because there's an awful lot of things that you could do. You could decide to sack some people. You could say, well, I'm going to save 8 of the people I employ, but sack 2 or 3, but which ones? You could decide to all take a pay cut. You could, as the owner of the business, take a pay cut or a pay freeze. You could, if you wanted to, steal money from somewhere to keep the business afloat. You could cancel insurance to save money, maybe not pay your tax bill. You could cut areas that stop the business developing, like stopping training and development. You could almost do nothing and see what happens. You can lower the quality of the goods and your services, but still charge the same and pass on that to your customers. Or you could take out a loan, a secured loan on your house, but not tell your family. These are the sorts of day-to-day challenges on a small and a grand scale that businesses are taking throughout the pandemic. And these are the lived realities of a lot of businesses. And all of these have moral implications. Does anyone want to kind of just make some comments about which one they think perhaps was the most immoral thing to do off that list? Just unmute your mic and just share your view.
The most immoral would be sack 2 people.
You think, oh right, okay. Could you explain why?
Yeah, well, which do you sack? What have they done? Was it their fault?
Yeah. But the counter argument for that would be that unless you reduce your workforce and your pay bill, then everyone suffers. So you're absolutely right. It's a really difficult one, this. But yeah, that's one view. Excellent, thank you. Any other views?
Well, stealing money to keep the business going,
that's pretty immoral. We could argue that's pretty immoral. Yeah, but it's done for good reasons. Absolutely. Yeah.
Take out a loan secured on your house, but not tell your family.
Yeah, I mean, that does happen, but absolutely, that would be awful. What about the owner takes a pay cut or a pay freeze? What do you think of that one?
That's almost a given, isn't it?
Do you think so?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
But what about the fact that they're the owner? They've risked all their capital to set this firm up. Why should they be the one that takes the hit to keep the business afloat?
Because I'd take it when the going's good, I'm sure.
True.
They would enjoy the benefits that would bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're trying to demonstrate here that these are the lived realities of how we apply authentic leadership and morality through leadership in our everyday life. So this is leadership in a crisis, and I would say that is a pretty realistic picture for a lot of small businesses. But we're doing this on a grander scale in the university, and in lots of universities we're looking at how we can make sure that we can deliver the product and the service to our students and to our stakeholders, but within a limited resource envelope, because we've got lots of uncertainties about the future. So what the decisions, this is one small business, but the decisions we take have a moral basis. And the bottom line is the staff and customers understand that, and I'll explain that more as we go through the webinar. So this is the sort of how it works in practice, and why really this is quite an important area for today and in our pandemic. So why authentic leadership? Well, an authentic leader, according to the literature, is somebody who has achieved high levels of authenticity. They know who they are, they know what they believe, they know what they value, and they act on those values and beliefs while they interact with others. So this is not something you do in isolation. We all know that feeling, or imagine that feeling of being the leader or the senior leader of an organisation, or even the leader of a team. You often feel very isolated, and you've got to draw on something to make decisions, or we hope our leaders do. So we all know what good leadership feels like, and we hope that's value driven. But most importantly for now, this is the behaviour that they model for people in their organisations. I know we as an organisation are expecting a lot of our team. We're asking them to make a lot of changes very quickly. We're asking them to work in a way they've never worked before. We've always had very standard ways of working, and now we're saying we don't know. Those assumptions that we base those management decisions and leadership decisions aren't there anymore. Everything's changed. So what is the bedrock of those leadership decisions? Well, it's your morals, it's your ethics. But how does that actually really work in practice? Well, for an authentic leader, they actively seek feedback for personal growth. Now, when I read that, I thought it was a bit of a teeth-sucking moment, because it's actually really, really difficult. I find it difficult to ask for feedback, and I try to put places within the communications I have with the people I work with to ask for feedback. But it is really, really difficult, because sometimes you don't want to hear what they've got to tell you. Although as you get a bit older, I think it gets a little bit easier. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on how they do that, or is that something they do as part of their routine practice, seek feedback for personal growth? And how they've done it?
I think you can make that part of your organisation's culture.
Yeah. And how do you do that? How would you do that?
You could encourage it in meetings. You could encourage it as a regular process in the business, maybe. It could be anonymous feedback. It could be something you do, as a group.
I think that's a really good point. I think I would argue that a lot of firms don't do that. I mean, especially if you've started that firm yourself, you've got a lot invested in it. It's your firm, it's your baby. I think as you get into organisations more mid-sized and large, there are lots of formal mechanisms. One of the things that I do is when I have appraisals with my team and I have the follow-ups, I'll say at the end, is there anything you want to tell me? And it is always that moment. But I will say to them honestly, look, this is who I am, and this is how I manage, and this is, I want you to tell me if what I do doesn't work for you. And it is, it's up to them to say something back, but unless you ask, you don't elicit a response. And the thing is, what you don't want to do is irritate people. And I think this is possibly this is just who I am. I question myself a lot, and I think I'm constantly looking for ways to make sure that that what I do worked for the people around me. And one of the things I did when I first started at Wolverhampton was I spent the first 3 months setting up one-to-one meetings with absolutely everybody that worked in the business school, and I asked them a set of questions, and one of them was, what are the values that you value about this organisation? And it was really interesting because nearly everybody said the same things. I mean, as I said, we inherently know what good leadership feels like, and it's very personal, but we know that means being a good person, being listened to, being valued, being clear, communicating. But I always think about those values, and I presented those back to the team. And I said, this is who you are, and I will be cognizant of this as we go through and get to know each other better. The issue is, how do you initiate change when you've got a very, very established culture? And that can be very difficult. And that's really where we are at the moment. We have to rely on the goodwill of people and that relationship to manage that change. So let's delve in a little bit deeper. So there's lots of models out there, but I thought this was really nice and simple about the dimensions of authentic leadership. So there are 4 according to the reference there you can have a look at. So knowing oneself, that is a lot easier than said. That's why I think asking for feedback is really, really important. And I think as you get older, I think that gets a lot easier. You get a lot more comfortable in your skin. You realise that those little, those annoying things about yourself you're stuck with, they're who you are. So self-awareness, but really thinking about what shadow you're casting in all interactions, I think is really, really important. So spending time to get to know yourself, the good, the bad and the ugly. And then balance processing, so that's objectivity, thinking things through. And I think you can get really bound up in that. I think that can almost be a paralysis if you overthink it, but developing mental ways of working out what both sides of an argument are is ideal. And it's great if you can do that when you're devising a change management process, or you're implementing a new strategy, or you're developing a new business plan. We're under pressure at the moment, so at the moment this is how you do this really, really quickly when there's multiple change processes happening simultaneously, and you're trying to bring people along with you, not just your close team, their teams, and then all your customers, in our case students. And then there's rational transparency, so acting in accordance with one's true nature rather than being fake. It's very, very difficult to be yourself, to be confident in yourself and say, this is who I am and I'm your leader, or I'm in a leadership position, and to work with other people. But I think it's really important. It takes a lot of energy to be somebody that you're not, and people can spot it a mile off. So be aware, be objective, act in according, be genuine, and then self-regulate. So behave within your moral values. Now, whether you are aware you're doing that, people are aware that you are, what your moral code is. It becomes quite clear, usually in a crisis. You know, I take great pride. Team members will say to me, I know you'll do this fair, Claire. I know you'll do this right. And that really matters to me. But it's more about that, getting feedback and thinking, okay, what are the things that are really important? And they're just simple things, but they mean a lot. People want to know that you've got their back, and that you will behave in a way that they expect, because we do expect a lot of our leaders, as we'll explore in a bit. So the bottom line is, when people come on leadership development programs, or people go away and read a book about leadership, they are interested in themselves. We know it's one of the most written about subjects. We know it's eternally fascinating, but it's about outcomes. It's about organizational outcomes. So, you know, if we use an authentic leadership approach, it should engender positive relationships. And then your followers engage in those positive behaviours that generate positive outcomes. And this is about setting standards. Organisations rely on having standards set, and those standards should have moral foundations. So the behaviours and the morals and the values that you espouse, you will see back in your organisation. So we've seen a lot of case studies of organisations who've got that really right. So when you watch the television now, all the adverts and on social media, everyone's flipped their advertising. It's all about what they're doing for people. And we like that, we value that. We want to see that people are putting things back. But this has never been more important now, because of COVID, because we're having to do so much so quickly. So any comments, any questions about what we've heard so far? About morals, or about anybody you've worked with or perhaps know of that perhaps has exhibited a moral set that you've found difficult? Or is morality something you've thought about in terms of developing your authentic leadership? Or is it something you just take for granted?
I think it's quite hard to go along with people's behaviours now, because people are now working in a totally different world and environment.
Good point.
And they've got other priorities as well that aren't necessarily work. They're not coming into work to a workplace 9 till 5, going home to their family. And I think it may now be quite hard for us all to know where our morals might have shifted to, or our priorities. When you're trying to get hold of people online, or you are getting hold of them, or they only speak to you on the phone, they don't answer, but that might be a very good reason for that. I think it's very, very hard now in this new world to gauge how other people are.
Now that's a really good point, because that's addressed in the literature. Because what the literature indicates is that if you authentically lead, so people can see that you are value driven, that you've got a moral core, and that's aligned within the organisation, and people follow that and exhibit that behaviour, other people will police that behaviour in others. And Emma and I were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about a situation that happened in our organisation, and we were both saying about how it struck us as not being right, and we were talking about what we were going to do about it. And I think if, and we argued that actually, fact, our boss has got a very strong moral core. We know absolutely that he's solid. He would always do the right thing. He's fair. He's transparent, and we instantly recognised through talking this through that that's what we are doing. We're policing that for him, and that's a strong word, but we're mirroring those values. So one would hope that if you've got this permeating through your culture and through the organisation, that others, even remotely, will watch for this, and the peer group, the team will monitor this, and it will self-regulate, because you're quite right. We've noticed that this has changed us permanently in terms of the way that we work. I used to go to the office every single day. I've now realised I perhaps don't need to do that. I can do a lot of what I need to do occasionally from home. So you're quite right, but that is what a lot of people are going to realise. So you need everyone to be on board. And this also can be exploited by leaders. So they can use this fact that this will be policed and this will be monitored by people for perhaps improper ways. So it's not always a good thing if people are kind of all bought in. It can be abused, but that's one of the ways that I think authentic leadership can be really positive, and it's worth investing some time thinking about what morality you are communicating to your team. Good point, really good point. Any other points?
I'll add one in there actually, that I was thinking about the other day is, so we've all probably managing teams where a bit like what Penny was referring to really is you've got that moral duty to bear in mind people's personal situations, which is even more elevated. So in a normal day-to-day basis, you obviously don't want to overwork your teams. You've obviously got that interest in terms of their families and so forth, but I think it's more elevated at the moment. So, we've got team members who are homeschooling, who might be caring for relatives, and you have this balance as a manager of, you obviously need your team to get the work done, but you've also got to recognise that they may be caring for people. They might be homeschooling their children, juggling childcare with their partner, or they may not have a partner and be responsible for the childcare on their own.
Yeah.
So there's the line of, as a manager, you've got to be mindful of that. But on the flip side, I also think you'll get certain staff members that will take advantage of you being a moral leader. So because you're trying to be authentic and moral, and you're trying to be supportive and say, absolutely, if you need to work different hours so you can homeschool your children, or, if you need to take Friday afternoons off so you can go and do the shopping for your grandmother, absolutely, I fully support you. Do you get team members? I'm not suggesting there's lots of people like this, but I would imagine there will be the odd few that may just take advantage of your moral compass. So how do you retain that moral compass whilst still ensuring that the job gets done? Because they could say, well, I'm underperforming because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So is that a reason to not achieve your objectives? So where do you stand with that? Because I would imagine that a lot of people have got that conundrum at the moment of someone's not performing, or they're taking advantage, or they're slacking off, and how do I enforce that when they could be going through all these other things as well?
I think we're in a point in time where we do have to give people the benefit of the doubt. So you're quite right. This is a changing picture. I mean, we get stuck in the day-to-day, and we're working, and then we remember that there is a global pandemic happening. We get stuck in our little bubbles, or somebody becomes ill, or you lose somebody, or there is a crisis, somebody needs to shield. You're quite right, but I draw you back to the current slide. This does not mean you don't set organisational standards. I mean, there's lots of different sorts of leadership. You know, would you necessarily get a better response if you were an autocratic leader and you said, sit down, shut up, I don't care what's happening with your family, I've told you to get your work done, get it done? Would you necessarily get any more out of them? And it's a good point, and I think that's the whole spectrum of leadership. We're looking at the lens of through morality, through authentic leadership, but it depends on, does that fit with you as a person? Can you use a little bit of this? Is this the right approach for this situation, this organisation that you're in, or not? So I think you've got to read the organisation, read the situation, but it does not mean you don't set standards. You're not everybody's friend. You are still responsible for making sure the business or the organisation or the social enterprise is sustainable, and that it can survive. And that goes back to the conundrums. To do that, you've got to set standards that might be difficult for people to meet, but you can work with people. If people understand that you will understand, and that you will be reasonable because they recognise that you've got a strong moral core that they value, then I think people are more likely to work with you. So what you want is a perfect situation where people will do what they want, do what you need them to do because they want to do it. Not everybody's like that, and we're not all like that all the time. So it's not an excuse to just say, all right, we're going to do big group hug, okay, hope for the best. It is about outcomes, it's about standards, so those have to be set. And then the people, the literature suggests that if you work and lead in an authentic way, that it will lead to positive organisational outcomes. So it's a good point, and this is the constant leadership dilemma. How do you get the best out of people? How do you do that fairly? How do you do that consistently? How do you develop people into that culture? And this is why it's such a perennially interesting subject. And you know, we want people, the right people in the right positions with the right approach. But it depends on sector, depends on the competitor group you're with, it depends on the industry you're in, it depends on who you are, your background. So, but this is just one perspective, and this is why I think looking at leadership through one lens actually forces you to think about the full spectrum. Great question. Anybody else before? No, because I plan to talk next about, I'll just talk about what major changes we've implemented in the university and the business school in the last kind of few weeks. So we shut down towards the end of March, and I'd never even used Teams, and I don't think my team had used Teams or Zoom. So we've gone through a whole, I think probably like a lot of places, gone through the whole gamut. So the first thing that we did was we put in at an institutional level a major crisis change strategy. So we looked at all the areas that we could possibly imagine. I mean the naivety of that in some ways now, I mean, it was a very solid piece of work and we worked really hard on it, but we didn't know it was going to last this long. We didn't know what the hurdles on the road were, but we had a strategy, and there was an institutional one, and then each business unit, so the business school created one, and we monitor that over time. We had very little time to plan for this, so you know, although it feels like looking back there was a long time, there was a matter of weeks before we really realized how serious this was. So we've had to really focus on the most important issues. One of our values as an institution and one of our pillars is students first. So everything we do has to have the student front and centre. That's one of our core values. So we had to make sure that the students were the focus of everything that we did. And then we implemented our strategies locally, because the business school is not the same as the School of Health or the School of Art or Performing Arts or computing. So we created our own plan locally. And one of the things I'm really proud of at Wolverhampton is we didn't lose sight of the bigger picture. So we immediately launched into, right, what is our role as a citizen to our local community? And what can we do there? Because we can help ourselves, but we have to help others along the way. So we launched into supporting the local trust with accessing PPE. We started to create hand sanitizer. We didn't do that in business school, and we launched a business support hub. So we tried to do things that would have meaning to our local community. Our nurses went into practice, and that was a huge exercise. And one of the things that we did was there was daily communication with staff and students. And that we've had feedback from the students as being really, really important. It has been a tremendous investment. So thinking about what that CAM strategy will be and having FAQs on the website, and that was a team just working constantly. There were videos, there were lots of ways that we could communicate with staff and students, because some people are able to work with very limited information and trust that things will work out. Other people need everything nailing down, and they want to know what the next steps are. So you have to take all different sorts of people with you, when really we didn't know what the next hurdle was going to be. So that's been really challenging. Some senior groups were set up. So we had a gold and set of silver groups set up at institutional level, and they were driving the institutional strategy. They were talking to Public Health England, talking to the universities groups, and trying to bring intelligence into to the university, and then working out how we would adapt. And then we managed that at a faculty and a school level. So there was an awful lot of information coming out simultaneously. And my job as the head of schools to filter that and to ask for feedback and get questions, and know how often to do to update the team, to compartmentalize and put it together in a way that's digestible, because we were getting bits of information about, you know, this is a project we're starting now, and you're thinking, right, how do I take my team with me on this huge change journey when they've got things at home, they're working out how to school their children, they've got elderly parents, they've got the whole range of things that are going on, and we were just heading towards assessment season, so students were concerned. We had, you know, 22,000 students that needed a lot of support as well. So there were lots of visible leadership. So there were lots of videos, Q&A sessions you could attend, daily briefings, and I was doing some regular bulletins, but I've implemented like a fortnightly Zoom meeting where everyone can come and ask questions, and we're developing a plan on how we're going to get through the next year. We also mobilised our stakeholders, so we've had to work with all our professional bodies. So this isn't just something we've done in isolation. Everything we have has an effect on lots of other people. And the other strand has been a focus on well-being. We've had ups and downs with people. Some people have coped really, really well. Some people have had major setbacks. I mean, I was in a meeting and I was reporting on something. My husband texts, and there'd been a death in the family. Somebody had unfortunately passed away of COVID. And right in the middle of a meeting, you know, it was happening. It was kind of, this is what it's like. It's very, very challenging. And that has an effect on your well-being. So we're none of us immune from this. We're all trying to be human and understand each other. And then where we are at the moment is we've done a full evaluation of all operations in the school and the university, and we're planning our return to campus. So we're working out what that's going to look like, because we're offering a blended learning approach from September. So based on public health guidelines, and there's a senior leadership group looking at that at the moment, how we're going to return to campus safely, securely over time. So that means we've got to think about everything that we do, how we teach it, all our regulations. So it's been a huge exercise. So that's what we've been doing in the last few months. Any questions, any comments, any suggestions? No? I'm exhausted just thinking
Sorry,
about
do you get a good take up of all these? It's good that you're trying to hit all staff from different ways, because they might want to watch a video but might not want to attend the meetings. Do you get good take up generally?
That's a really good question. That's why they use multiple modes. So sometimes there's been a Q&A I haven't been able to get to. They've done so many different things. It's written, it's however you can dip in and out. So I think the breadth has been really impressive. So there's something for everybody. There's, you know, regular touch points. So staff and students have found that. And of course now we need to change our messaging, because we've kind of got through, we've got a rough idea where we're going, and we're putting the building blocks into saying, right, what does reopening look like? What does reopening the campus? We've been fully operational all the way through this, but what does a phased return back to campus look like? So yeah, I think it's just the breadth and range. And we will be testing this. So there's been a pulse survey, and we will be testing whether people have found that useful. So it's going back to getting feedback. There's no point doing things and being busy if it's not hitting the right mark, if it's not achieving the right outcomes. So we're just waiting for the outcomes of that pulse survey. So we've asked everyone. It's a good point. Any other comments? So I want to allow time at the end for some questions. So I'm going to put forward Exhibit A. If anyone was under any illusions that morality and leadership were not linked, I give you Dominic Cummings. So I don't know whether anyone could have escaped the volume of discussion that occurred around the morality of what Dominic Cummings did or didn't do. This is a completely apolitical section. I'm not going to go into any politics here, but I don't think anyone could have escaped the discussions that occurred both physically and online around the Dominic Cummings scenario. And I think the thing for leadership was everyone was looking for what his boss was going to do. And that was a question of morality. And I don't know if people want to come in here and just share some thoughts about, so we can just sense whether there was a moral perspective to this, because I would argue that there is, but to say that in actual fact, if you think that people don't think about morals and leadership, then this should be a reminder that they're thinking about this, they're feeling this all the time. You're judging others, and others are judging you for what your moral core is. And this really brings it home. Any comments about the whole Dominic Cummings and others, but this was just the easiest one to kind of pull some headlines. There were thousands of headlines I could have pulled up, but there's different perspectives. Any comments about the morality, about authentic leadership, and what happened around this situation?
I'm surprised that he was allowed to continue in doing what he was doing. I mean, from Boris's perspective, as an employer of this particular gentleman, he should have been looking at both his employees' moral compass and his. And if they're setting the rules and they're not appearing to comply with them, even if he does give an explanation of why he did what he did, his morals are questionable, I would suggest, and so are his employer. So from that perspective, I think more action should have been taken place on the master-servant relationship between the two of them.
That's a perspective shared by a lot of people. So you've got demonstrating that there's definitely a view there. It's definitely there. It's in the public domain all the time. Any other perspectives? I mean, obviously I said it's apolitical. There are other people we could have chosen. It's just the one that's most commented on. Any other comments? Or has my point been made?
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? But I think not quite sure if Boris had a moral dilemma on this one. But I think I wasn't surprised that he did not leave his position.
Yeah.
I think he should have. I think that would be being political. And I think what Boris showed from a leadership perspective, that he was willing to front this out, ride the storm, and get through it at all costs. And those costs came from internally within his party, and but there was no shift.
Yeah.
I felt there was no shift at all from Boris with regards his moral compass on this particular person.
Yeah. Well, I think and I think it's really important to note that, yes, obviously he is a leader within his role within government, but you're right to point out that it did reflect, and that Boris could not escape from the effects of this, and questions people discussed his leadership style, and those were moral questions. And I just wanted to demonstrate to you that this it might seem something that's just way away from anything within our lives. This is part of who we are. This is the way that we understand people, and morality is there. We've all got an opinion, so just remember that when you're thinking about reflecting on this webinar on the importance of morals, because people think about it quite a lot. So what about bringing it back to you? I thought I'd just pose some questions and then encourage you to perhaps have some reflections yourself now and when we finish. So what moral questions about your leadership are you facing as a result of the pandemic? Is there anything particularly you'd like to share or you'd like to perhaps tease out with us? And then how much time are you investing in getting to know yourself? And you change over time. So every time you go into a new context, a new organisation, you're reminded through your reflections and through your engagement with other people and through new challenges who you actually are. And are you skilled at objectively thinking through both sides of the issue? What do you do? What mechanisms do you use? How do you know you're doing that? Do you involve others? Are you very skilled at that? Do you use some technology? Do you spend time? Are you very quick? So how do you do that? How do you work out what both sides of the issue are? And are you acting in accordance with your true nature? So do you self-check yourself? Do you know? Do you get a feeling when you think, oh, this feels like a place where I really don't want to go. What am I going to do? Do you do that on the hoof? Do you do that? Do you have time to think? Do you remove yourself? How do you self-regulate in that way? And how difficult is it? And then how do you self-regulate your behaviours in relation to your morals and values? Do you say, I need time out, I need to think about this? Do you think about that in the way that you communicate, in the way, or not? Do you think it's a hindrance? In actual fact, you should just have confidence in what you think and get on with it and not have to reflect. And are you an authentic leader? Do you think that really works for you? And then how will you next seek feedback for personal growth? So I don't know if anyone wants to come in and just any of those questions that have really piqued your interest, and anything you want to share about authentic leadership and the moral spectrum of leadership.
I think if you're practicing authentic leadership, what you're looking for is also a consensus from the people around you, above and below, to validate what you're doing. Because we can go off on a tangent and it's very easy. And what keeps us grounded is being authentic, checking what others think, and evaluating, because everybody has an opinion and they all have a bias to their opinion, and it's about looking at what people are saying and doing and understanding where their perspective is, and does it align with yours, and does it align with the goals and strategies of the organization.
I think that is an absolutely golden point, because one of the things that we often forget about when we're doing with students of leadership or we're developing as leaders, we forget it isn't about us. You're only a leader if your followers give you permission to lead them. So you're absolutely right. Followership is key to this. And you could almost say then, so what if you go into an organisation with a particular set of values and then you realise the people around you don't share those values and that you're having to really work hard? Do you persevere? Do you adapt? So you're right, the followership angle is vital to this. It isn't about just some hero saying, I'm a moral person, you know, I'm a good person, therefore everyone's going to do as I say and it's all going to be wonderful. It's about those interactions with people, and everyone's going through this themselves. Absolutely great point.
I would also argue though that even though you need to have morals within the organisation, and as a leader you want to translate that through, there is also this situation that whilst it isn't important that the people above you and below you share your morals, that if they don't, you can't start to alter who you are or what you do. So I've worked for an organisation in the past where I've got a particular set of morals, and unfortunately that organisation didn't do things in the way that I would have done them, in line with my morals. I could have took an approach where I changed my morals to fit the needs of the organisation, and I didn't. I left the organisation because it was not an environment that was in line with my morals. So whilst I do agree that you need to ask for feedback about your behaviours and that you need to look above and below you, you also have to question that feedback, because if that feedback is that perhaps everybody doesn't agree with what you're doing, is that because their morals are very different to yours? Going back to the Dominic Cummings situation, you could argue, not that I'm arguing this, but you could argue his moral was to put his family first, irrelevant to his job. You could say that that is why he won't apologise. That's why those front pages say, I'm not going to apologise. And you could argue that's because it was in line with his morals, irrelevant of our morals. So I think it's important to have that balance of your own morals as well as those of other people, and seeing where, making sure you're in the right organisation that fits with those morals as well.
I think that is an absolutely fantastic point, and you're quite right. There were plenty of people that shared that exact view about what happened with Dominic Cummings, and it's a great example of that kind of just how difficult that is. And you're not going to please everybody. So you would hope that when you went through the recruitment process, you would have an opportunity to share who you were with the recruiting panel. They would know who you were, and they would say, yes, there's a good fit between you and your authenticity and your values, and that they would recognize that when they recruited you. But it doesn't always work out like that. So absolutely, the challenge of all leadership is where you reach challenge, and often that's with people. So that I think the authentic leadership would say, don't be fake, don't be yourself. But I think you have to think about the wider context. If when you get there and you realize, look, the way I want to behave, the way I want to lead, that's authentically me, and I won't compromise that, you've got to realize that you've reached the end of the line. If you can't be yourself, you'll waste a lot of energy being somebody you're not. So the authentic leadership is unequivocal. Don't be fake. And I think an authentic leader, somebody who was very morally driven, wouldn't be able to operate to their full potential if there was a cognitive dissonance between the organisation or the people around. But I think you ultimately, leadership often means you run up against people with different views, and you hit challenges and you have fallouts. It's just part of working and having relationships with people. It's how you resolve them. It's how you sit them down and say, right, come and talk to me. What's going on? How can we get to a situation where this works, or having those honest conversations. And I think if people know who you are, know you're decent, they'll respect that.
Absolutely.
But not always. Sometimes one or others have to leave the organisation. It isn't perfect. This is really difficult territory, but the argument is if you go in and you know who you are and you know what you stand for and you can communicate that, you can hope that people will follow that and respect that. We fundamentally, as I said, understand what good leadership feels like. It's slightly different for different people, but no one wants to be humiliated. Everyone wants to be able to reach their full potential. They want to be thanked. They want to be recognised. They want to be stretched. They want to feel comfortable and safe. These are not things that are wild. They're not unreasonable. But you've got to do that within the context of a commercial organisation. And that's where it's just something you've got to work on all the time. Nothing stands still.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. So we've got probably time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. That's absolutely flown by. I've just realised what time it is. If anyone wants to put their question in the chat, feel free if you don't want to come off mute. Has anybody else got any questions or thoughts really, or examples of perhaps moral dilemmas you might be facing yourself at the moment? Everyone's very quiet. Is it lunchtime?
Lunchtime.
Everyone wants their sandwich.
Well, there's a lot to go there. I mean, it's been great to have some discussions and to really challenge people's thoughts. So I hope we've had an opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that we do here at the university, understand a little bit about what authentic leadership is and where it fits in with a wider leadership discourse, and encourage you to go away now and reflect on who you are as a person, as a leader. When did you last check in with yourself and who you are and the shadow that you're casting within the people that you work with or would like to work with. It's just something to think about, and the slides are there available embedded in the presentation. So go away and have a read and get back in touch. Let us know what you think.
Absolutely. We will share we will email you after this session and share the Zoom link with you. I'd be, really appreciative of any feedback or anything that you think, is an area where perhaps we can cover in future e-clinics as well. Also interesting to know why you chose this particular session. So if anybody can leave any comments in the chat box or drop me an email in response to sharing the link, that would be really helpful, just to try to understand, what's made people sign up to this session and what would you perhaps like to see from us moving forward. And we are a university, but we are here for businesses as well, so we want to try to take our internal knowledge and put it into a way that actually will help businesses, rather than just being a university that nobody speaks to. So that's what we're here to do, is to build those relationships with you. So please do get in touch, and we really hope you've enjoyed today's session.
Well, I want to thank you, Emma, again. Thank you so much for making this happen and allowing us this opportunity to be able to have a discussion with our stakeholders and with the wider community. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for taking your time today to participate in this webinar. And I hope that you do reflect and get back in touch. We're on all social media channels. I think there's at the end, is that the right address there? Checked it, Emma? Yeah.
It's got the typo in again. It keeps, apologies, it auto corrects. When we put exec ed, it's gone back to exceed. So it should be exec ed, not exceed. So EXED at wlv.ac.uk. That's our email address, but you will get an email over the next couple of days with the link on as well, and to direct you to our Eventbrite page, so you can always get in touch, and there'll be my direct details on there as well.
Perfect, that's excellent. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all go away and have something new to reflect on while you have your lunch, and I hope you all keep safe and well, and that your loved ones are safe and well, and you thrive and survive through the pandemic.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Nice to see some faces as well instead of some blank screens. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll scroll through. There we are. Excellent. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.